Alright guys, I'm going to be doing a build video on my first race quad. It's going to be the Floss 2. I was going to do a full build video from start to finish, but it's colder than my girlfriend's heart outside. So I brought it inside on my computer desk, so hopefully I can make something happen. It's not the best area, but I got my soldering iron, my basic tools and stuff in here. So hopefully I can, at least get through some of it. I still want to put something up on my channel about my, this build. So yeah, just hopefully I can make something happen with some editing magic, and we'll just go from there. Stay tuned, guys.
Alright, so on this Floss 2, I decided to go with the 5mm arms for a little bit more durability. Since I went with the 5mm arms, you have to get a non-flanged lock nut because the bolt won't run all the way through and go into the lock nut part, the locking portion of it, the nylon lock portion, if it's flanged. They state that on the website as well. I decided to go with pink on this build, so I got all pink nuts, pink standoffs, so that should look good. I got my Brain3d Prints as usual in pink. This is the AXii 2 RX mount, camera mounts, and then of course some forever tubes. These things are awesome. If you have not tried them from Brain3d, definitely check them out. For motors, I went with the Turbo Mach 2206 2550 kV, the pink turbos. Well, they're pink, and also I've heard some good things about them. Guys in my club run them, so I wanted to give them a try. The only other pink motors were the Brother Hobby returners, the pink and greens and the pink and blues, and I wanted to go with all pink on this build. So this should definitely set it off. I went with the TBS Unify race since this will be for racing. This is a repurposed video transmitter, so that's what I run in all my quads. Got a Unify. The R-XSR, so we can run telemetry. For ESC, I went with the Spedix GS35, the BL Hilly 32. Flight controller, I went with the CL Racing F4. So it should be a good flight controller. It's got cam control, so I can mess with all kinds of settings on it. For the antenna, obviously I went with the Lumenier AXii 2 for the mount. And for the camera, I went with the Runcam Micro Swift 2. It is orange. Everything on this build is pink. So I took everything out of the case, and I'm trying to paint it black. I should have went with black, but where I ordered it, they didn't have it in stock. And I didn't actually order this camera for this quad. This was for a different micro quad, so I decided to use it on here. But I think I may try out the new Foxier Predator micro in this build if the the black doesn't come out great. That camera is already black, so it should work great. All right, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is get the I'm going to go ahead and put my low ESR capacitor on this ESC and get it mounted up. And then we're going to get our motors mounted, all the wires ran to them and soldered on. And then we will start with the 10 in the flight controller and getting all our wires ran for the VTX receiver and camera. So we'll go ahead and do that now. All right. think it looks good. Now, onto the flight controller to tin it up. I've already put my gummies in here, so I gotta be careful I don't burn them up. Alright, so we are going to be using the motor pads. We're going to be using the camera pads, the camera control pads, the receiver pads on 5 volts, telemetry pads, our VTX pads, and I believe that's it. That's that. That's TX1 and TX6 on the bottom. It's a really nice board. I like it a lot. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we need to get VBAT to the board. Alright, so I do want to clarify, I ended up using the current sensor on the ESC itself, so my pigtail came off of the ESC to the left, and then my positive and negative went to the flight controller to get power, and then I jumpered the external current sensor pad on the bottom of the board, and then used the current sensor wire from the 4-in-1 port on the flight controller to the ESC. If you decide to use the current sensor on the flight controller, then you have to have power coming off of the flight controller, and then your positive and negative from the ESC would have to go to a positive and negative ESC pad on the flight controller itself, and then you just leave the internal current sensor port selected. Now under here I also want to put my receiver in there to get it out of the way, so I'm going to go ahead and get my receiver now, and we are running telemetry on this receiver, and this board is super easy to wire. I mean, everything is right there on it. And I did look up what the pinout for the camera was that I said earlier when I said I thought it was cam ground. You got cam signal, which is going to be your OSD port on your camera, then or cam control. Then cam signal is going to be your input, your yellow wire on most run cams. Then your cam positive and cam negative. Now cam signal is going to be your in to your OSD. And then down here, your VTX-S, that's VTX signal, which is going to be your OSD out to the VTX. So runs through, camera runs into here, VTX runs out of here, gets OSD in the meantime, and then camera control is so you can control all your brightnesses and contrast and all that stuff inside the Runcam without having to hook up the little remote. And then right here is a 9 volt and a 5 volt. 9 volts automatically selected, so that'll give your camera and your VTX both 9 volts. You can do 5 volts if you want, but I'm going to prefer 9 volts. A little bit more power, should filter a little bit better. I know some people say running straight off VBAT is good, but I like to run through the BEC, so and it looks like it's going to work just fine. So for the pinout on this receiver, it's pretty simple. I think you got positive ground, S-bus, you got negative, positive. This is your S-bus signal, the yellow one, and then the green one is your telemetry or smart port signal, and then this white one is it's so you can hook up another receiver, because that's what this R-XSR is designed for. It's a redundancy receiver designed to be used as a slave receiver. So you can, if you ever have one fail out on you, you can have a different radio for, like, you know, big model scale aircraft, and you can run a different radio, a whole different radio system. But I use it for this because it works great. I've had no issues with it. Does the job. It's small. It's got telemetry. What more could you want? So I'm going to go ahead and pull the paper out just to double check that what I said was correct. Oh, excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. I'm going to be sniffing in the camera. Alright, so this is your receiver. Top one's ground. 5 volts, S port, and then S bus. This should plug in like this. So ground, 5 volts, yellow is smart port, green is S bus. So the yellow is the smart port. So the yellow is going on our board is going to go to the telemetry pad, which is I believe UART3. Yes, and then S bus is UART1, which is S bus is going to be the green wire. So green wire goes to S bus, yellow wire goes to telemetry, and then your black goes to ground, red goes to positive, white wire can come out because white wire is S bus in. That's for the redundant receiver or slave receiver. So we're going to depin that one pin. Pop that out. I always save these wires, like all the wires I cut off my motors, I save them all. Put them in a bag. Trust me, you will need them at one point or another. Now, that can't go there because these big fat wires are in the way. I can put it up here or mount it right here. But if you do that, there's pins on the bottom of these receivers, and you've got to be careful because those pins contact anything conductive on the bottom. It will short out. If it touches carbon, if you don't wrap it and you set it right down on your carbon frame and you power it up and all these are touching carbon, it will short out, it will ground out. So if we're going to put it under there, we have to wrap it very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bind this to my radio now, and then I'm going to wrap it with heat shrink, and I'm going to wrap it with clear. I'm going to wrap the whole thing with clear heat shrink, and then I'm going to mount it in there with some sticky tape. So I know it's not going anywhere, and it should be relatively secure. So I'm going to go ahead and bind it to my radio right now. And these can only take, I believe, 5 volts. If you put more than 5 volts, oh, if you put more than 10 volts into it, you will fry it. So don't be hooking anything 3-cell or bigger up to it. I'm going to hook it up and bind it now. Tiny Whoop battery. Perfect. We're going to go ahead and create a new model. Alright, sorry about that, guys. My camera died. So basically what I did was, I put my transmitter in the bind mode, held down the bind button, and then connected my positive and negative on my wires here into the Tiny Whoop battery and bound it. So now it is bound to my radio. And I went ahead and put some heat shrink on it, and the heat shrink covered these pins right here, and this is some really good heat shrink. There is difference between good and bad heat shrink quality wise. There is. I like to purchase my heat shrink from a well-known place versus like eBay. I already put one coat on it. I'm gonna use this. I'm using this butane lighter because my heat gun's in the garage and I don't feel like getting it. This works just fine. I'm just gonna put another coat of this on. Really shrink it. Alright. Let that cool down. Now that should be pretty well protected, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go one step further, and I'm going to add a piece of clear heat shrink that's kind of long over the entire thing. Go ahead and plug this in. Now I wouldn't do all this if I wasn't putting it in between my ESC and my flight controller, because if it was you were to fly and this thing was to rub and then eventually rub one of them connections open and you're in the middle of a race or something and the connection hits a joint on your ESC or your flight controller and you go down, you're going to really wish that you took the extra precaution to make sure that all connections on your quadcopter were secured and you weren't going to have any shorts or any type of funny business going on. I can still unplug that if I need to. No biggie. Alright, good, get you some. Alright, I don't got my heat gun in here, but what I like to do is twist these up while applying heat from my heat gun. That way they stay, they look pretty, and if you ever need to extend your wires, you have a whole mess of them shrunk up. I'm just applying some heat to the wire, and then twist it up real good. So we will worry about soldering that up after we get the rest of everything kind of in place. Alright, so now that's our receiver. We know how it mounts up. We can move on to the next part. The next part is going to be our pin. And earlier when I soldered this up, I soldered the motor 1, 2, 3, and 4, the motor PWM. I don't know why I did that. I wasn't thinking. I don't do that very often, I think. Or maybe I need to do it more often. Okay, so what we have is you got your pinouts on your flight controller, and you got your pinouts on your ESC. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the ESC one and we're going to take the flight controller one. We're going to depin the flight controller one, or the ESC one, and then we are going to attach the wires from the pins off the flight controller to the correct pinout on the ESC, and then that'll call it a day. So this is the ESC one, this is the flight controller one. We are going to pin them out correctly with these wires. It's going to be long. I wish I had one of the crimpers for these, so I could shorten them up and just make it real short, you know, just make it to where it's, but I don't. So alright, so when mounting these antennas, what I like to do is I like to fold it over this way, and then hot glue on the connector, hot glue down the side, and then put a piece of electrical tape folded over this way, and then wrap it with, you know, a piece of electrical tape like 1 or 2 times, and then it stays pretty secure. But if I do it like that, I'm not going to have enough room to, enough length. I'm not going to have enough length to come all the way back to where the AXI 2 mount is, so I'm going to run it back this way. Same concept though. I'm going to heat shrink up here and then heat shrink along here, and then yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the I got a piece of the TBS shrink wrap I'm going to go ahead and put on, so that should get me there. And then when you do put that on there and hot glue it, when you're using the AXI 2 mount, you have to put the antenna in first and then do it, because there's no way to do it now and then stick it through. You have to stick the coax through and then secure it the way you would like to secure it. 5 volts, our ground, our video, which is going to go to our cam signal. VBAT plus, which we don't need, so we can depin the blue one, and then ground and OSD. So the OSD can also go, the end one is going to go to our camera control. Camera signal will be video, and then we got camera positive and camera negative, which will be 9 volts. So we can go ahead and depin the ones that we don't need. Alright, so this right here is where I start to notice that running a lead out of the back of the quadcopter with the AXI mount doesn't leave for very much room for the props to swing. So I ended up going through with it and seeing how I could mount it, but
I ended up realizing that you need a really short lead coming out the back, or you have to have it coming out the side. So that's what I ended up doing. Also, right here I have the battery straps running underneath of the bottom plate. I redid those, and I have them, like the bottom of the straps actually going on top of the bottom plate, but still going through those two slots on the side. Provides a little bit of grip for the battery, and also gives a little bit more space, because I did end up running with 15mm standoffs instead of the 20 that come with it. A little bit more low profile, but all in all, I'm really happy with the build. So I'm glad. I'm glad I decided to go with it. Hopefully it holds up. So yeah, I'll go ahead and finish the video for you guys. Appreciate it.
Smoke test complete. Let's plug it in. There it is. It's finished.